What is up, everybody? This is episode, I believe, 86. I have to add that to the title afterwards. I sort of forgot. Sort of an impromptu episode, joined here by Hector Roos. I reached out to him on Twitter this morning because I had gotten an email about the whole petition thing. Thought you should come on, talk about that. In general, maybe have a little bit of back and forth. I know that's an top because it covers a bunch of topics I've been covering on other shows like the Swamp Cast, Swamp Creatures, which you guys should go subscribe over there if you haven't already. They're great, and I'm on that show quite a bit. So kind of going to jump into things pretty quick, but go ahead and give sort of an intro to yourself. I know you've been on the channel before to talk about other things. I think we talked about RFK stuff at one point, another topic before that.
Yeah, the swamp is alive and well in Florida, and that's where I'm at. I'm Hector Roos. I'm involved in Libertarian Party politics down here, as well as I guess nationally. The question was the 2022 governor candidate for the Libertarian Party here in Florida. I'm currently the chair of the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade County, Miami Libertarians, and I was last year. People really got to know me around the country because I was encouraging this recruitment effort to recruit Robert F. Kennedy Jr. To run on the Libertarian Party line. And I think a lot of interesting things happened last year, most of it unexpected. And the experience we're kind of still living that experience now because people won't stop talking about it. So we're still we're a year after convention, and we're still talking about what happened last year and the consequences thereof. That
is true. Do you have a microphone? Are you using a mic now? I'm only asking because they're mentioning it.
It's a directional mic. I can bring the directional mic closer to my face, so it's more easier for you to hear me.
Okay.
I am getting three full bars when I enunciate and speak into the mic. So you let me know if you can't hear me.
I don't think it's an issue of the audio. I hear you fine. I think it just sounds a bit crunchy, but it sounds like it's picking that mic up. So it might just be the mic. It's not a big deal.
It could be the extra goodies that are on the service.
Yes.
Yeah, probably what's what it is. So I just turned those off.
I'm gonna look here. Let me see if I do.
It doesn't give me an option to about games. Oh wait, it does. Never mind.
So I took
There it
off
is.
the auto gain and I put the
Right.
background stuff on.
That
So
should
we'll
do it.
try that. Yeah, that sounds a little bit better. We'll just run with that and
All
deal
right.
with it in post. um, yeah. So basically, I guess where I'm coming from it was obviously I've sort of seen I guess what we would call the Porter docs. I guess the regarding the Angela stuff, and then I saw that you were sort of covering the Colorado stuff, which Karen Ann Harlos. I saw the video that came out, the like 6 minute convention video, the world's shortest convention for
Well,
Wiley and
they kept going for another 2 hours, but they haven't released that video yet.
right. Yes, that and that's what I understand. Is so Karen Ann showed up. This was a convention that was not properly noticed. And Karen Ann showed up anyway, and then called what you're claiming is an illegal at this point, or against the bylaws, we'll say, convention, which I think is an issue we've seen now pop up, what, 3 times, 2 times? How many times now are we going to go through the same
Well,
charades?
yeah, Michigan is. I mean, it's not that unusual. Florida doesn't have like that type of high level notice requirement like that government requires.
Right.
California, Michigan, Colorado you have to publicize in a real publication out there where the entire public in the world can see it. Most states, most state affiliates do not have that kind of high level requirement. They just say put it on your website, and that's enough.
Right.
Where people who are expected to see the notice can see it. So, but if you don't put it there, someone could sue and cancel all the work you guys showed up to do, and because
Right.
the judge will say that notice is sacrosanct, everything can be voided based on that. And I think LP Colorado had been sued like 3 times in the last year, so they were very wary of lawsuits over objections because people had already made objections at that time.
Right. Well, that
Yeah.
makes sense too. And then I saw obviously in the video we have 2 people there. You've got Hannah Goodman and you've got is it Kevin Wiley. Um there so this is sort of where I'm coming from, I guess, on things, and then we can kind of have the back and forth a little bit maybe. I came into things seeing I look at Kevin. I see what he's putting up on Twitter and some of the interactions he's had, and some of the other stories I've heard from other people. And so I don't
Are you talking about James
character too
Willis?
much. Yes, is it James? Okay, is it
James or
James?
right.
Okay, yeah. So I haven't had like personal interactions with him. He does seem to have a certain way of talking on Twitter and handling himself, which I guess, I've had sort of different opinions on this. I've always said that if you're kind of doing those things in the guise of trolling or in the guise of comedy or on your own time kind of thing, that's different. Obviously, like my Twitter account, things like that, I don't really connect to my being a board member here in Alaska, things like that. Um, Sort of those are my opinions and they are my own kind of statements. I don't know how I feel about the way he's kind of carried himself there, and I don't want to seem hypocritical on stuff, but I think to be honest with you, everybody in the whole Colorado side of things sort of reacted to the whole situation kind of poorly, in my opinion, publicly anyway. I wish a lot of these affiliates would take things to, again, LNC route, sort of what you're doing, I think is the way to handle this, not the sort of going on socials and talking about it consistently. But
Well, it's even more important. What happened in Colorado is unfortunate in the sense that you had you have actors literally just trying to divide people and make them
certainly,
so mad and get them to react so quickly that nobody can talk it out and go to court as quickly as possible. I mean, that's really what happened.
yes.
What's happening, and and right now, if this was Michigan and that timetable, people would already filed their second lawsuit by now. And what happened 2 weeks
Okay.
ago, and the difference in the environment is a little different now because so many lawsuits have already been filed. Michigan is still languishing in self division and conflict, and you have the current LNC, or at least the chair, has said no more lawsuits. Everything mediation, everything everything will be resolved. We're talking it out, and so I at this point I comment to people this might be the first internal conflict in an affiliate that has not escalated once it starts.
Right.
So
And I wanna just address this. He says he's this is Hannah. Okay. It doesn't show up. It just shows me your name. So I appreciate you actually telling me. Raised 170,000 for Colorado, so I allow his behavior. Well, that's insane. I mean, that's amazing. If he's raised 170,000 in Colorado, that obviously is
so
ridiculously good.
I,
Not only that he works his ass off. This is Hannah Goodman, by the way. Yeah. So I mean, to be clear here, I'm not at all saying that because somebody is brash on Twitter or something, this should make them ineligible for anything. Far from it. I'm just more of making the point that as an outside observer, somebody who is trying to get all this information from the outside, the periphery, I'm trying to look for people breaking down the situation. When I went to social media, the first thing I'm seeing is his interactions and some other interactions. So it was hard for me to really parse out what was happening in total until I talked to multiple people behind the scenes. When I saw Hector's email he sent out in this whole petition thing, which we're going to get more into in total here, I sort of got a better picture of things, read through some more, and had already talked to people who gave me sort of similar information. So it gave me sort of a better look on things. In general, like reading your email, I'm going to sign that's a petition I have no problem signing in general, because I think the arguments that were happened way too fast in general, and almost it's not necessarily talking about the Colorado thing. That's something I think needs to be addressed by the LNC in general, pretty sternly. And
I hope they do. I hope they
yeah,
do it. Yeah. But they're all sort of interrelated because there's
right.
an ongoing conflict. So what happened last year is a lot of decisions
Well, it
got
seems like it all involves
well, this is it.
our favorite pink-haired communist too.
Well, I don't. There's ideological differences certainly. I don't know if they're communist. I do know they're
Socialist,
certainly
whatever.
different, but I don't know the difference either. Honestly, to defend that. So
All leads to the same shit.
yeah, I mean, put you up against the wall, and yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, and it does feel that way, right? So the point is that there is been a breakdown in communication party wide because there's people who feel very passionately about what happened last year, one way or another. With the nomination after the national convention, what that looked like. I mean, it was very the you had a national nominee, presidential nominee, who was selected with the lowest support in the history of nomination processes. That actually means something. And then we saw the result of that, right? The really the poorest results, poorest fundraising, poorest support in any presidential nominee in LP, possibly in LP history. Although there's obviously all these facts can be disputed, but that's the takeaway. And it didn't have to be that way. There was a lot of conversation, but to point out why it got so divisive. So the selection of the nominee. This is recapping, right? Selection of the nominee finally concluded, and after midnight on the third day into a fourth day, basically, of a national convention. So this was decided by 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, on Eastern time, right? So
I was there.
incredibly divisive. So yeah,
It sucked.
yeah, it was terrible. So what does that mean? That means after that convention, I stuck around an extra day. Um, you know, and I never really saw a trying to unify the party or going up. What's the vision? Let's heal the rift. This was a very unpopular decision. So how can we make this work amongst everyone? No, there was not that kind of conversation. Rush forward. Then what was the response of different state affiliates kind of feeling out that can we still change our minds? Can we go in a different direction? Do I even have to deal with deal with this, like accept this decision. There was a debate on that. That did not get talked out of, and a couple states didn't really didn't move any at all. Somewhere between 10, maybe even as many as 20 states didn't really want to put the nominee on the ballot.
Right.
So that means, and what all, I'm going to say something that people really don't really realize, that there were probably times when the national committee, looking at how little support that the national nominee had probably was faced with the choice of, do we keep this guy as the nominee or switch him out, because of how poor the support was for them. And instead, what we saw was the national chair, Angela McCardle at the time, save the campaign and keep them as the nominee. Flash forward to Colorado, and you had the now resigned national secretary, who also was in Colorado, basically have a public meltdown over, no, the national chair is conspiring with the state of Colorado board to switch out to another candidate, like just like that. No real evidence, nothing like that. And then they end up she ends up bum rushing everybody so she ends up putting in paperwork that allowed the Democrat Secretary of State, that's very hostile to the Libertarian Party of Colorado, to say, well, we're going to freeze in place these paperwork, and you are not going to have a say about actually who your electors are, who your nominee is. I've decided that for you because the secretary is giving me this paperwork that I've accepted as legit and legal, and you can take me to court if you want to, right? So all of this is on the premise that, and here's where we get to today. All of this is on the premise that all these decisions that are irrevocable without going to court are based on either misinformation, innuendo, or just a fantasy in someone's head that something bad or against the rules is happening. But let's point out something. Before even LP Colorado could do anything, the paperwork by Karen and Harlos was already submitted, and whatever, you can accuse Colorado of not doing anything, but actually they didn't get to do anything, frankly, right? Right. And then everybody, all the people who participated in that, seem to be like patsies or just also victims, because they just hear from one side that says, "Oh, they're trying to do something bad," and nobody talks it out, even in that at a state level. So today, or the last week and a half, this division had maintained itself to the point where now we're going to challenge. The LP Colorado leadership at a convention and try to take them out of power. And they ended up doing so, led by Karen and Harlos, in a way that was not legal. Right? They tried to basically hold a convention on the location, and that was noticed, but the notice wasn't legal sufficient. They were going to ignore that legal problem and hold the convention anyway. And the people who went along with it were like, well, we don't know any better. Just in case, we better show up, right? That's their reasoning.
Right. So I am taking up, I guess, somewhat of a devil's advocate position here, but I want to kind of just with the notice requirements issue and things like that. I brought this up with the swamp as well. I don't know exactly what the situation is, but my understanding is this is a rule that has been in effect for quite some time. This isn't something new. So then it becomes sort of this issue of, and this is not to agree with what Karen did, because I don't, but this is a secondary sort of thing of, why was this meeting not noticed properly? I know they had a previous cancellation because of a venue. That is what I've been told, and I understand that to be what happened there. So then they set this date and had tentatively set this as the convention, then realized they didn't properly notice, and so it wasn't going to be able to take place. So is this, I've had people say this is honest mistake. What is the situation there?
Well, like any state board, I don't care which state you're in, there is a drop off in volunteers and activity, and after every year there is a lot of exhaustion after every presidential year. So Colorado is no different. They had a person assigned to do these to file these notices. That person had some personal drama in their lives, and they dropped the ball. That's the reality. And then to say that the guys come forward and talk to all the other members in Colorado, and that seems to have satisfied most of them. The reality is though is why did Karen Ann end up resigning from the LNC over this? Or at least she claims that she didn't. She claims now, oh, it's a coincidental that this happened. I got blowback from it and I resigned. No.
Well, her whole thing is basically to say, and she said this I saw on that one stream she did where she was spanking herself, that she was claiming that it was Malagon and that because he was bad mouthing her and because Stephen Nikela didn't keep some nebulous promise that he made to, I guess, do something about it, which makes no fucking sense. And so she got mad because of that and took off. I don't and I don't buy that for half a second, because Karen Ann is somebody who's dealt with some of the worst of the libertarian trolls coming after her, and that couldn't crack her. So I don't buy for a second that because Malagon is in fucking in the business list talking some shit that somehow fractured her veil and made her go spurg. I don't buy that for a second. I think it's much more likely she realized she screwed up with this Colorado stuff and she was already getting heat for all the other things she's been involved with, and she just dipped out. I also understand she doesn't have really much involvement at all in Colorado's actual just regular LP.
Yeah, she resigned on her local
right.
Her state.
Okay, I wanna give Hannah her response here. I don't want to. My vice chair took on the notice requirements for convention. He didn't submit it because he was on crack, evidently. He is now in rehab. Well, I hope he's doing well. I was assaulted by my husband at the same time and been dealing with separation. Divorce party came second at the time, as you can imagine. Well, yeah. After getting a little settled, we went back over our convention, and the treasurer realized the 15-day notice was never paid for or submitted. Okay, so personal stuff with your vice chair and personal stuff with you. I mean, that makes sense to me. Shit happens. I never thought the not scheduling it and missing the deadline is all that big of a deal, because I've seen that happen in so many LPs affiliates. I do think that there's been times when that has been manipulated, in my opinion. So I don't like seeing it happen, but again, shit happens. And it's another state affiliate. I don't know their business. I'm not on their board, so I'm not in these meetings day to day. I would say probably, yeah, I don't know, if you don't have an interim vice chair already, that might be a smart play. So the convention was sanctioned by the Libertarian Party of Colorado, and she was trying to take advantage of the confusion.
I guess
but it wasn't a valid convention because the notice requires. Right. So to kind of expand on this, it wasn't a valid convention for anybody to be there. There was never going to be a convention that day because the convention had not been properly noticed. They would have had to publish a thing in multiple newspapers saying that we're having a convention on this date. That wasn't done because of the reasons that Hannah just gave, and I have no reason to not believe Hannah in this situation. I've had great interactions with her up to this point in the LP. And regardless of all the horseshit drama with the whole fucking Colorado Pledge stuff and all that. Because frankly, I debated that on Hannah's side back when it was going on. So it is what it is. But if it wasn't a valid convention because of the notice requirements. Yeah, so it wasn't. It wasn't a valid convention at all for Karen Ann to call, or in this instance, for Hannah to call. Hannah could not have called a convention and held one legally under that because it wasn't a noticed convention. It could have been, you would have been immediately sued, and just like Hector said, you'd have been held up in court because this wasn't a noticed convention. And so this goes right back to Karen Ann, regardless of any rant she wanted to go on there in that little 6-minute video that everybody at this point has seen on Twitter, which James recorded. There's nothing she can say that changes the fact that she has no ability to do what she did, because the convention itself is not in the bylaws. It's technically, I guess technically that would be against the state's law. I mean, the state election law, or so, I mean, that's not even just against the bylaws. That's literally criminal thing, or at least a judicial thing.
Right. I mean, that is the point. The law requires you to follow your own bylaws. That's basically what it comes down to.
Right. Again, not valid because we're like legally required. That legally part is the thing that I'm pointing out, because Karen Ann knows this. Karen Ann's not a fucking idiot. My understanding, I think she's a paralegal or something along those lines, or she
She's been
does.
a paralegal for 20 years. She's been
Yeah.
a registered or certified parliamentarian for what, 4? I mean,
Yeah.
this is not a stupid lady. And the problem why the LNC was pushing back on her, because she basically asked the LNC chair, I'm going to do this. Please accept the results of this convention I'm doing.
So did she say that before or after doing it?
Before and after. So she knows she didn't.
Well, that's not great at all.
Not only that, there's like the parliamentarians have this discussion group online, right, where they ask each other questions about, what do you think about this scenario? What do you think about?
I heard about this.
Yeah, and she went on there in May and was asking questions about, how do I hold can I figure out a way to hold a convention anyway, with the given scenario of what happens with LP Colorado. Oh, she didn't name LP Colorado, but she named all the scenarios, and no, not a single parliamentarian agreed with her, and in the text it reads like, no, you have to believe me. Like, you have to side with me. Like, just like, no, I'm looking for the answer. I'm shopping for the right person to give me one person to give me the right thing. So when she ended up doing was, well, she didn't hold a complete convention. She didn't. The only thing they didn't do over 2 or 3 hours that they were all there was hold actual elections for all the elected positions. That was it. That's the one thing they didn't do. That's pretty clear. That's what she said on that last interview that you were talking about.
Right.
That they did all this other stuff except that. Right, and they still have their convention still open. Like they just closed it temporarily to another date in the future they haven't decided on. No one on what's Hannah saying?
Well, I see her in the chat, and I will say, Hannah, if you are like wanting to, you are perfectly fine to come on the show. You just DM me on Twitter at Liberty Layton, and I'll send you an invite. If not, I'd love to get you on in the future and talk about things in general. But no one on the record of court where she sued me. She only has a paralegal, only was a paralegal for 1 year. I have the transcripts. That's interesting.
Well,
very interesting. I will say, like, I've interacted with a few people who, in the Liberty sphere, who were like, oh, I've been a CPA accountant for X amount of years, and then found out later on they were like lying through their teeth, things like that. So that does happen, certainly.
Yeah, some states require you to be a certified, get a certification for being a paralegal. Florida, where Karen Ann's from, where I'm at, does not. So I'm sure she has experience here in Florida too, but maybe in Colorado she had to be certified over there. The
That's
point is that, so all these dialogues, like what's happening in Colorado, is a microcosm of what's happening at the LNC. People haven't talked to each other. There's all this talk of conspiracies and accusations. It's just like I said, it's all the stuff that happens after a busy election year, and we're still seeing people accuse each other over stuff now, and it seems that there's kind of this weaponization of bylaws that's been happening to make sure that, for whatever reason, whether it's personal or if people have a larger, more professional agenda, whether they want to take the party, they're just poking at past members or using them to try and attack their political opponents within the party. That's unfair, because the next step after that is, well, what do you do with that? That means either you take it on the chin, you fight it in some kind of internal capacity, or you go to court. I mean, so this is begging for escalation, or begging for someone to come in and add gas, and then it goes wild, just like what's happening in Colorado. So this is just a direction that nobody really should be really wanting to go into, if the focus is liberty, not some type of personal position.
I also think it's telling, just as a libertarian myself, and obviously somebody who's involved with the party, I look at this stuff and I think it's very telling that 9 times out of 10, when you see these kind of things happening, the people that sort of create these schisms are sort of the lefty libertarians. It seems to be the pattern here. Karen Ann has made some wild statements revolving around that, and so I just like, there's certain people where I'm like, I'm never surprised when I see these kind of things play out. I think the Colorado situation in general, I was pretty immediately like against Karen Ann's I don't think she made a single move in that entire Colorado situation that I thought was okayed by the bylaws or okayed by the whole law situation, because I'm not a lawyer, not a paralegal, nothing, but I am somebody who very much likes law, and so I read a lot of books on legal stuff, and not necessarily the bylaws issue and Robert's rules, because I find that stuff to be dreadfully boring, but actual like just legal theory and that kind of stuff I'm interested in. So, and I watch a lot of court, like real world court. So, seeing that whole thing play out, I was like, well, I'm reading the law right in front of me. I'm reading what you have to do to notice the convention. It's in black and white. So how do you get around that? There's no way around that. And then also, how are you ever in the position to call a meeting when you're not the chair of the party? You don't have the authority to do so. You're literally the national secretary. It makes no sense to me. And since when has the national secretary been in a position in the party historically where they've been running around doing all this horse shit, instigating all this horse shit, filing paperwork in Colorado, filing paperwork, signing on to legal shit, and doing all this crap over the past couple of years she has? And I mean, I defended her in DC, because she helped me out here in Alaska. But, go ahead. Sorry.
I would just want to remind everybody, the LNC actually removed her for the activity that she did last year. They suspended her.
Right, that's true. They did. She did get suspended.
It was a lengthy multiple months long process, and the only reason why she was still back in the secretary position is because the JC said, "Oh, there's a due process issue here," not because the facts. And they said, "Oh, you can hold the trial again," like just like that. Like, okay, so you went. So just a due process thing that she was even still in that position. So we didn't resolve any conflicts. We just kicked the can down the road. There was no finality to this conversation. And then she does this last thing with Colorado, and that was it. That was enough for the LNC members writing on the wall. And I got to go, I guess, before the next investigation starts.
That whole time we were streaming, I was doing so on my goddamn regular webcam, on my computer rather than my $200 like Logitech webcam. Why do I look so fuzzy? And then I'm looking at the thing and go, wait a minute.
I thought it was like you were going with the motif of the old West, like yellow.
Mm-hmm. No, I have like an actual video light and stuff now, so my whole setup looks actually decent. I have like the actual like stereotypical podcast gear, And I did my own backgrounds and stuff for the stream, so like it has that like touch that I had back in the day. I tried to recreate what my old streams used to look like, but just better.
Right. That's good.
But
of course, with blurring my background because I haven't set up my background.
Yeah, no, I'm normally in that same situation. So I do want to say, for people in the chat, to go to this petition here, I am going to drop this in the chat because I have the ability to do that right here. And this is the petition that Hector sent me. I got a lengthy email along with it. That's the doc right there.
I put a bit.ly in there too.
Okay. I guess that'd be easier to. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. There you go.
Private chat. There we go.
Oh no, I put it in the live chat of the YouTube stream.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and then I'll just drop it myself here too. Anybody.
I guess what the petition. Let's get to the petition. What it is, right? So the petition is there. So there's this is a sign up form talking about basically the same issues. It's actually 3 petitions in one. And the first two petitions are dealing with this basically sick report that the LNC passed without a lot of debate, if any, without a lot of time for people to actually read it. When you
Now, I'm
unpack
friends with one gentleman on the LNC. My understanding, and you mentioned this and you were right up there in the email I got, that they had 24 hours to read what amounts to, what was it, a 100-page report.
so people, whoever formatted at the end, they reduced the margins and they shrunk the text so that it would fit under 100 pages. When you increase the margins to just 1 inch all around and regular 12-inch font, it's over 160 pages. So I think that was done in order to try to give the excuse of, oh, you had time
Yeah,
to
no
read it.
shit.
Like, no, it was intense. And then when you look at the review of the report that I created there, it looks like there were some big cutouts of the report to make it even smaller. So it's like they basically didn't put any of the information or who said what to define how they reached their conclusions. So all you have is conclusions and not a lot of information. And the
Right.
moment that you were to see that, it's the moment you go, wait a minute, I like some more information with my report, not people's bare conclusions. So that's the biggest issue. The other thing that they had was, and I had a conversation on another live stream show, was that the main thing they're pointing out is how much money was spent or how much this issue of a call center. That's part of
Freedom Calls
the
LLC.
Freedom Calls. So there is uh, clearly a pattern of vendors and people working for basically people working for the LNC, whether volunteer or paid, to not show exactly where they live, where they get their mail, or specifics like that could require them to be hunted down by people out there in the ether to try and get them canceled or fired from their job or just otherwise harassed. So knowing that, um, the pattern of, hey, let's create an LLC to mask who's actually making all these calls, what's the actual final structure of this. Yeah, that's I can see that as the go-to why this even exists.
And I'll
That
just say here, as somebody who's dealt with this before, I have a father who owns a business. I've worked in sort of entrepreneurial spaces. So, I mean, like an LLC is literally just a limited liability corporation. It's just you separating basically, you're creating, people refer to these oftenly as shells, but literally an LLC is basically what anybody from the mom and pop gift shop down the road from you to the coffee shop up from them has. Almost everybody that owns a business is going to in some way incorporate an LLC somewhere in there.
Right. Now, Barfo comments that it's also the best way to hide grift or embezzlement, as the allegation sometimes it goes. Now, that's actually true, but you can do that with any third-party organization. It doesn't have to be an LLC. The problem is that the reporter investigation is pointing at 3 different documents to prove that the LLC ownership interest. That means they're claiming that Angela McCardle or her boyfriend are making money directly off this contract because they own the company. Yada yada yada. Whatever. They don't. They're going off of. They have one document that's originally in their possession as the LNC, which is a W-9 that any vendor has to give in order to your taxes.
Right.
That you get a 1099 out of. It's not signed by either McCardle or her boyfriend. It's not signed, and who basically is also acknowledged, like he acknowledged openly that he is a volunteer coordinator with that company, not getting paid. That's what volunteer means. So there's a question about, well, how much hiding are they trying to do, really, right? Anybody asks them, they answer honestly. It's this other group that's making these calls. We're just merely facilitating this, and the call center itself, the software, the lists, the results are all recorded through a call center program that the LNC owns. So look at all this transparency that's happening, and then the question that people are attacking is, well, it's because we don't know the ownership of this LLC. We don't know who's really making money behind the scenes there. We don't, and then the report says, well, no, well, it claims to say, oh, we do know because there's 3 documents. One of them is in our possession that really doesn't say much. The second one is a document that's like a certificate of incorporation from the state of Delaware that the LNC never obtained. It obtained it from the earlier Porter investigation that Porter
The
himself
Porter docs, right?
will scream at me that he knows who gave it to him. I'm like, no, but that person will not come on the record to say he got it or how he got it. And apparently it's only available to attorneys, and the LNC never had their various attorneys they have to actually go and get
I mean,
it.
I'll just say the two people I've heard brought up as the person who would have turned that document over has always been either CAH or Nick Sarwark, and I've always been more tempted to believe that it was Sarwark.
Well, the point is that it's sort of nebulous. Like, what's the origin of this document? And if the report was really interested in getting down to the truth, they would have replicated what Jake Porter did and made it an original investigation. Instead, they really rely on everything he got, which is not fair.
Well, in general, I'm an auditor, so I'm a hotel auditor. When I looked at the Porter docs, that was my immediate issue. Was I said, well, like any accountant or anybody who's ever familiar with the scientific method, right? You want to replicate this. So I need to be able to basically go through the exact same chain that Jake Porter went through, the Porter docs, or I think that's his name, Jake Porter. I need to be able to go through the same chain of information that he went through. My understanding is you cannot do that because, and by his own admission, a lot of the information he put forward in those docs as fact, you cannot go back up with evidence or prove yourself because literally you're just take my word for it, bro. This person that I can't say gave it to me.
Right.
That is not going to hold up. And I think honestly, when people go, well, why hasn't there been legal charges or why isn't there something going on? It's like, well, probably because anybody who looked at this would go through the exact same situation. If you can't actually produce any real evidence that's replicatable, then you don't have any.
Anybody on the LNC who would have had time to read it and think about what's actually in this report would have said the same thing you did. Period.
Right. And so, and again, so a question you'd probably know the answer to, like when you say the LNC had access to this, so the LNC had access to knowing the information that was coming in through the call banking because they owned the back end, basically. They owned the actual.
That was the contract, right? The contract said that they're going to use, that the LNC is going to own the call center software so they can track what the performance of the call center itself.
Now, one of the devil's advocate arguments I've heard is, well, Angelo was the head of the party and the LNC wasn't going to voice their concerns about what she was doing because then they would get in some kind of trouble. The problem I've had with that argument, which I've heard a bunch of these people make, is that you don't need all of the LNC to make a fuss about this. You need literally one person to have just said, oh, hey, she's doing this with this LLC. We've sent money out to them and we're not getting what we want in return.
Right.
No one did that.
Right.
No one who was aware the money was getting sent out did that.
12-month period. That's the issue.
Right, for a year.
Period. And this is, and that the expenses of the party are known on monthly reports, and they're filed publicly with the Federal Elections Commission at least once a quarter. In a presidential election year, the frequency of reporting is even more. So, and this goes, let me finish up the other thing. So the other document that's in this report that they're relying on to point out that this is why we believe this company is owned by either McCardle or her boyfriend is a document they don't have at all. They just completely made it up that they have it or alluding to it. It's a document that basically says that if you check this box on the W-9, then you go to this other document that would have to be filled out that says that then the only person that could have been the owner is the one who is the incorporator. And I'm like, that's like 3 or 4 steps of inferences, and you can't do that. There's no change. First of all, they don't have the document, and they're saying that someone filled out a W-9 to that meaning. That's not necessarily true. Anyone who deals with the IRS or these filings, and I had to start many of them myself. Like I would call the FEC and say, well, how do you want me to fill this out? Or the IRS, how do you want me to fill this out? And they'll say, well, check the box later, and when you do your filing, that's the one that matters. So like. It doesn't really mean what they say it means anyway. So it's a lot of assumptions, suppositions. I hope this is true, but we're going to say this is fact.
Right.
And that's relying on a document they don't even have is nuts. And by the way, it didn't dawn on me for like a week that they didn't even have this document. And this is actually after I published a report. I didn't realize they actually didn't have that document whatsoever. And I'm like, why do people keep on referring to this? And I'm like, it's in the report. It's in the report. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I look and like, well, first of all, it's only mentioned on the side, and then it's not in the report. I was right. But I'm like, I didn't figure out why it was there in the first place until like, oh, okay, this is what they're basing this entire conclusion on, is a document they actually don't have whatsoever.
One, it seems like, again, if all these other documents, at least a chunk of them, can't be replicated or can't be obtained by even the LNC or anybody else, or haven't been obtained by the LNC or anybody else, and are just being taken on face value from some rando who produced this report, then you've got a bit of a problem, because A, there's no chain of custody on anything that you could call evidence there. There is no real evidence you've produced, at least nothing that you can not just create in Photoshop and say you have. Literally, I mean, at this point, it's the equivalent of somebody producing, and you'll see this constantly on the internet, somebody posting what they say is a DM that they received from somebody when in fact it's been doctored. Because unless you're seeing that actual thing in front of you, you really can't buy any of this shit these days. And so, and especially when, again, you're talking about people who have done a certain side of the LP, who've done some pretty slimy things in the past, including the stuff that CAH did in Colorado,
Right.
and with the legal stuff she did before that. So, these people all seem to run in the same little pattern.
The LNC has a choice now. Now that Karen Ann Harlos has resigned, the LNC has some freedom now, without someone pressuring them with the bylaws that they can either redo the report itself, or just entirely say we give up and we're going to just pull it back and like rescind our adoption of the report and everything that had to do with it. I mean, that's the right thing to do. If the conclusion and the work was just not there, they have a responsibility to do that. And if they don't, then they're guilty of misrepresenting what happened to the membership and to the public, and that's a violation of our libertarian ethics as enshrined in our bylaws through the statement of principles. I mean, there's obviously there was a move to rush a bunch of other business through too, and part of this proposed JC appeal is at least cancel what the people didn't put on proper notice. Again, another notice question, right? It was good enough for Karen Ann in the LNC, and it was good enough in Colorado to do what she needed to do, what she wanted to have accomplished.
Right. I think that's also sort of what you run into, is it's like people want to use the bylaws in their favor when they can, and then not follow them when they want. And Karen Ann certainly understands the bylaws better than most, and so seeing her do that made me just like, that infuriates me, because there's no way she can say I didn't know what I was doing. And again, you point out that she goes to these parliamentarians and they tell her what she's doing isn't right, and she still goes ahead and does it. So you can't, I mean, once that person resigns, you have to then, almost like a cop who gets caught planting drugs on somebody, and you have to go back and look at their previous cases. Like, you kind of have to go back here and look and go, okay, well, what is that term? Fruit of the poisonous tree, right? So, like, you have to go back and look at these other investigations that she was involved in and see if anything impermissible went on. In this case, I think there probably was, especially when you look at, in general, the way the LNC handled the Angela investigation. When I zoomed out and looked at it, is not great. Moving things forward in 24 hours, not giving people the ability to read through a report that's, like you're saying, ridiculously long. They're changing fonts, changing content in general, is ridiculous. And I had already heard all that from people on the LNC, and so I was like, well, shit, if this is going on, that's a big problem. And then on top of it, when you take into account that a lot of the stuff that the so-called investigation is going over is stuff that came from the Porter docs that can't be replicated, that doesn't have a chain of evidence, that is literally basically the equivalent of just a screenshot of somebody saying, trust me, bro. Just doesn't seem like it should hold up very well if it were brought back through. And especially considering that's going to be used as some sort of cudgel against Angela if she does attempt to do anything in the future, which is exactly why, if it was done maliciously, the reason it would have been done. So if you kind of let it stand, and that is the case, you're kind of letting a certain side win.
Well, specific. So one of the appeals actually literally says the LNC does not have the right to permanently suspend the rights of a member to ever run for LNC internal office, run as a candidate. So and that's obviously a big problem because this is not a person who is they're doing this without due process effectively, right?
Right.
Now, I would zoom out a little bit more, and this same LNC within the last couple of months paid a consultant $8,500 to review their operations and strictly advise them, don't let these internal disputes play out in public because it hurts the image of the party, right? And so even the biggest critics of the party are looking at the sick report and going, how sick is the LNC to think that they can expect donors to continue to have the same confidence in them, to continue donating, if they're saying their financial controls are so messed up that over a course of a year, they had no idea what was going on,
Right.
with the call center vendor. It's ludicrous. They just spent $8,500 to get basically torn up by the consultant telling them
well, this is something I think people in general have a misunderstanding of money and the way that this party has functioned for a long time, because the Libertarian Party is constantly crying about how they're broke, which to an extent they are, but a big problem the party has had, in my opinion, not only with this administration of LNC people, but even with Angela and the previous administration, this is an issue I have in general, is stupid spending. Um, and the party, if it's financially hemorrhaging money, if it's not doing well, that is ultimately going to look horrible to the people who would be coming into the party, just as bad as, personally, I think, talking about all this shit publicly. I know people talked about, well, the selling of the buildings and things like this and all of that. In general, my position has always been that if the party wants to get back to getting big donors, they have to get back to making a big cultural impact, because
Right.
most of the donations that come into the party don't actually come from politics, really. They come from cultural movements outside of politics that enter into the libertarian world. Many of the Ron Paul people who stick around, who still donate to this day, aren't really here because they're libertarians. A lot of them are even Republicans who are just still throwing money at the party because they know it is the Ron Paul people.
Sure. But,
And I think that exists in other areas.
yeah, look at the sequence, right? You need a radical to attract the attention. You need like a Ron Paul in order to then get the support level of a Gary Johnson. Or these days you need a Malay in order to get to that Gary Johnson standard. And I mean that it's like you need more milk toast, like middle of the road administration that evokes confidence and professionalism, right? I think nobody was going to disagree. Everyone has an issue sometimes with the issue basis, but no one's going to say that the presentation and the people that were running the party weren't always constantly having a problem with the spending issue or the
Right.
Or a vision issue of what the party should be doing on a daily basis, right? So we want to get there. I think we all want to get there. We want to have a radical, and at the end of the day, we want to end up somewhere in the middle so that we can build confidence in the party.
To address what Barfo's saying in the chat here too, because he's talking about how funding dried up when the MC took over. I will tell you, as somebody who was very much paying attention to the donor rate and stuff like that during that time, that the donors were down long before the Mises Caucus took over. In fact, you have to remember back to when the JBH drama, the Sarwark drama, all of that stuff was still going on. The financials of the party were in the shitter then. There hasn't been really, what really was sort of portrayed by the Mises Caucus, I think, was ultimately that they were going to fix these problems. I think they came in and ultimately I think many of these problems were not fixed. That is my concern, is that, almost like a Trump presidency, a lot of the claims that were made never materialized. Now, I happen to think a lot of that happened because ultimately, for a couple reasons. One of them, I think, was that there just wasn't a legitimate purge. I think that's a legitimate issue the party has. I think there's a lot of people in the party that are pretty much avowed leftists that simply wear the Libertarian badge in name only. I also think there's a lot of just straight up legitimate Republican conservatives that are doing the same thing. So I think both of those groups need to be sort of sent back to the parties they belong in, to put things as nicely as you can say it.
I think the expression "people as policy" is an important point to make here. The MC just did not attract enough people, like high level operatives or administrators into the party structure itself, into the leadership structure. So they didn't know how to raise money. They didn't know how to talk to people. They didn't know how. There not enough of those, right, to actually build up. And then there wasn't enough people bought into the vision, right? That at least that Angela was presenting, which I'm going to tell you was no different than what the LNC today is promising, nor was it any different than the LNC before her was promising. She just was going to focus it on. She was going to have some differences of focus. That's all you really need in this organization. We're all trying to promote libertarian policies and ideas. So it then becomes, well, we're going to answer the ones today, or we're going to keep talking about the ones that nobody's paying attention to. That's really,
right.
That's the really big deal about it.
Right. I mean, my whole concept that I cooked up with the whole Voglerist sort of libertarian outlook on thing, and sort of trying to manipulate it into more of an independence movement in the individual states based on the states and therefore the affiliates, I think is a way of doing that. But I don't think anybody's going to go along with it because, frankly, no one understands the ideas of that shit. And I look at New Hampshire as being the only state, really, other than Florida, that has some sort of reverence for that kind of community aspect of the party, and sort of creating sort of cultural pockets of the party.
I definitely said about New Hampshire, Florida. All the Swamp Boys, I love them to death, but like only one of them that still lives in Florida.
Yeah, that's true.
But so there is community, but it's a pan libertarian community, and we have to realize that if we want that vision, we can't even hold ourselves to the national boundaries. We have to go even beyond that. If we want to reach concentration, and that's just the end result. The first libertarian president was not in America. Sorry, it was Argentina.
Yeah, that is.
It wasn't even Europe. It was Argentina. Come on. So it's like, I mean, and he's kicking ass without even having to do pass all that much in terms of policy changes. Like if his famous May Pact, only 10% of it passed. I mean, everything else was executive authority. And listen and look, everyone's saying what an economic miracle Argentina is today, right? Based on fundamentals. If you just deregulate enough, all the other give the market an opportunity to make its corrections, the market will provide. I mean, there is a lot. I'm looking at Barpo's comment, right? Every country is about to collapse. If we're going to say Argentina is about to collapse.
Well, I think ultimately, I mean, Malay was in a very, again, all of this stuff goes back to culture. Regardless of what the economy there was in Argentina, once the culture shifts because people are literally broke, they can't eat, they're looking at the televisions that they do have access to, and they're showing them their politicians talking about how we should basically keep paying into the same system, because those are the people who Malay were running against. And then you have Malay saying the opposite. Frankly, people were sort of forced into voting for Malay in a way because they didn't have much of another option. It's that or complete and utter collapse. I think ultimately what you have to do here in America to get something like that, or get real libertarian cultural figures in high places of power, is going to ultimately be through creating or leveraging whatever's happening today in the culture. That's not being done by the Libertarian Party at all. In fact, I think the only affiliate that's legitimately doing that is New Hampshire. I don't think any other affiliate I can think. Yeah, and so I think I think we need to ultimately leverage what's happening here in the US culturally, use that to our advantage. I think we should be picking candidates and chairs that are already sort of high placed figures. I know this is always something people have joked about, but finding celebrities that are libertarians to run for office or to be party figures, finding people who already have some kind of stature, again, in the cultural world, I think is very important for the Libertarian Party to do, because I still think there's a lot of people in the LP who think that that don't understand how closely tied whatever's happening in the world culturally is to the way that everything happens in the LP and in politics in general. You have to get, and what Barfo's saying here, by the way, is perfect. You need somebody who's, yes, a good-looking male figure who's well-spoken, right? And this is not to throw shade at anybody here in the libertarian movement, but I ain't gonna run for president under the libertarian banner looking the way that I do. Like, that just ain't gonna happen. Um, Again, I have no problem running for higher position within the party, but I wouldn't run for super high office looking the way that I do unless I was something in Alaska, in my home state. But there are plenty of people I can name that are in these positions that could be running for higher politics that do have yeah, and you're right. It is well, and okay, it is shallow, but at the same time, there's something to be said that somebody who is well put together, that is well kept, that looks decent, that is, comes out there and speaks to you and is articulate and well spoken, that person's probably spent a lot of time to get to that position and has probably put in a lot of effort. I think that shows that they're organized to a degree, you know.
Let me push back a little bit. Um, there is the Libertarian Party has been a 54-year experiment with declining success in electing people to office, uh, mostly because the two parties have enacted laws across the country to deny ballot access, or even to reduce the value of ballot access, so that people are obliged to only vote for the one party in power, not even two, just one. And so we now have a one party system in America that is just switching back and forth. You've seen the railroad meme, right?
Yeah.
Switching the switch back and forth. Only one party is allowed in power at any given time, and it's not really much of a shared power either. So it's just these days we won't bully you as much if you just hang tight with your turn, kind of thing, right? There's always a snapback, they say, So Democrats are like, oh right, next year Trump is doing so bad, we're going to take this back in next year, and that's we have to realize then as a result, what is the influence, what is the power that libertarians have, and that conversation is not an easy one, because it involves having to make people in the other parties where everybody's at, or the independents, a lot better on our issues. And if we are trying to do, we're trying to do that, we have our tools are still the taking, fighting. Was it the issue where you have a candidate who beats the gap between the two, right? I forgot the name of that.
Spoiler.
Weaponizing the spoiler effect, right? Using that as an actual tool. That's what Angela was doing last year when she was saying, well, this is the only way Trump is going to win is if he appeals to libertarians. And so you harpoon the guy into certain issue commitments. And lo and behold, he won every swing state handedly. Every one of them. They even claim an electoral college landslide, whatever that means. But that is a way to exercise influence over the process. And if you keep doing that enough times, maybe not only do you mainstream libertarian thought into this process, hopefully is happening in Colorado or New Hampshire for that matter. You can elect your own, and of course, other people having this discussion now. Let me point out at the beginning of this, when I got here, I was saying that people have not had a chance to have a real conversation about what happened last year, and the result is a lot of either of bad feelings. People just walked out, or they're like, what comes next? But generally, they haven't had the conversation. And I think a couple weeks back, the conversation got really triggered when the vice presidential nominee Mike Chermont said, "I'm walking out. I'm going to go Republican Liberty Caucus, full Liberty Republicans."
Right.
And and the comment was, "Well, don't let the goodbye and good luck." And the reality is that still these are arbitrary distinctions. They're just legal ones, right? That people feel like they have a bigger advantage of doing so. Most states do not have like automatic voter registration. Most states are still open primaries. Most states there's no restriction in the bigger scheme of things for multi-party affiliation. There is the idea that we cannot work with we're limited to working within our own party, like strictly the ones who identify with the Libertarian Party. It has been something that has continually made the party shrink, because then where's the influence, right? You have to actually reach out beyond the Libertarian Party and certainly not get stuck in intra-party fights, right, in order to make that happen. And so something's got to give. And where's the growth? I mean, we're not, there's a begging of let's rope in a billionaire to buy out the party, and then he'll solve everything with money, right? There's this fallacy, whether it's Elon Musk or whether it's billionaires that were behind even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or his running mate who was a legit billionaire, right, Nicole Shanahan. Sort of, at some point we have to realize, well, what are we trying to accomplish? What are our goals? And instead, you have, unfortunately, with the LNC, you attract a lot of very passionate people who do not want to entertain working with anybody outside of the Libertarian Party, unless they are minor parties already. Like you can't even try to make a deal. If that's the case, then how can we ever get the next Ross Ulbricht free, right? How can we ever get, ever win people over or provide a legit pathway to deregulating our society and eliminating bureaucracy? Like, how can we one day not, have enough influence that the big beautiful bill will never be passed again in this country, where we're creating a army of immigration enforcement larger than the fifth largest standing army in the world. Or at least the budget wise, right? These are issues.
I do want to address this because, I'll say I don't even necessarily disagree with you, Barfo. I think they did some things to try to grow membership. Whether they were successful on that is a different story. Obviously, I don't think they very much were. I will also say, though, again, my point here is that consistently going back, the LP has been on a sliding scale, losing basically the grip on the party in general for a very long time. You have to keep in mind that going back to the 70s, 80s, libertarians were getting elected all over the place. Even in the 90s, that was happening all over the place. And the party was a very positive place. It doesn't really matter much because even back then, the party didn't make a cultural impact enough for that to be lasting. I make this the point to people all the time that if the party had grown even 10% back in the 1980s, then the party today would be drastically larger than it is now. As it stands, we still have an opportunity because we now have a cultured banner, the Libertarian banner, that we get to use as a party, which sort of automatically enters you into the cultural arena, because at this point the libertarian argument is in the zeitgeist. When people are talking about politics, they are forced to talk about libertarians because yes, and very much so, Perot ate that group up. You're very much correct there. But my point being that we are in the cultural movement now because of what was done in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Now, they still had a lot of failures. but they were at least successful in getting our ideology and our ideas to be enough of a household name that there aren't many people in the United States you can mention libertarian to that they don't at least know what you're talking about to some degree. Now, they might have an outrageous idea of what a libertarian is because of what the duopoly has put in their heads, but that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against basically the entire cultural side of the duopoly fighting against what libertarians not only believe in, but are fighting for in the political arena and the cultural arena. And when that's happening, you've got to be willing to start playing things a little bit down in the dirt. And you've got to be willing to clamor to get whatever kind of cultural spotlight you can, or whatever spotlight you can to return yourself to some form of glory, or to practice enough to get up the gall to be a standing army of sense within the political arena, which at this point the Libertarian Party just isn't. And in order to get to that point, they don't know how to. You know why? Because all of those people from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s were also unsuccessful at growing the party large enough to make radical change in the United States. Other than the cultural impact we've had over time growing the party, there hasn't been a big shift from libertarians in the cultural side of things. There's been small ones that have flowered into bigger things. I'd say the anti-war movement, obviously, we get to pay a lot of homage to.
Well, I need to say this, that the most successful libertarian movement in America has been legalization, bar none. The biggest and most popular. I'm
Yeah,
talking about legalization of marijuana,
yeah,
bar none. It's the most successful. 40 states have adopted some kind of legalization, whether full medical or full right to the plant. That says something. On the other side of that, we just recognized the passing of the 1980 LP presidential nominee, Clark. Well, I forgot his first name. But the point is that he was 92 years old in passing. He followed the first influential LP presidential nominee in the zeitgeist, 1980, and he was somewhat overshadowed because he was fourth place because there was a congressman named Anderson who also ran that year. So and that was the first year rigging that like. The point, though, we have to realize that generation of libertarians that go back to the 80s, they're on their way out. Even some of the 90s, on the way out. I mean, the founder, Gary Nolan's hasn't been with us for 10 years, maybe a little more than that. So, I mean, this is it. This is where the party either goes into a different level of activism, or it kind of just fades away like it's been doing for the last couple of years. And it's just a downward trend when you have the core group of donors and activists. It's just attrition, and it accelerates as with time. The numbers numbers don't lie. Gary Johnson's 2016 campaign raised around $15 million. George Jorgensen's campaign raised about $5 million, and then the one after that didn't barely crack 600,000. So it is a precipitous decline of support for a national candidate, a national campaign, the investment of that. And at some point, we're supposed to have that conversation. When there was an impasse regarding selecting the ticket at the convention, and people were saying, "Oh, we'll be left without a candidate if we know that." No, that was not the case. It would just open the process back up according to bylaws, or we could even pass a bylaw amendment to start over. But the strategies that have been working for people for decades to drag things out to the fourth day in the middle of the night or middle of the morning really shows that it's about who can more tire the other side out than really do the right thing. Right. So,
and I will respond to this real quick. I think Amash ultimately would have been eaten alive in that election simply because he had at that point made some enemies on both the left and the right that would have gotten him a lot of heat.
100,
But
yeah, it would have been anybody.
go ahead.
Anybody, maybe except Kennedy, would have done incredibly poorly as a nominee. No, it wouldn't have mattered who was the Libertarian nominee at the end of the day.
Under the LP banner, I can't think of anybody you could have ran that would have had a chance. RFK, I think, would have gotten some pretty high percentage numbers, which would have been decent to see. But there's a bunch of issues there. We could debate for a couple hours on that, I'm sure.
Well, we're talking about minimums. Let's not like explore fantasy maximums of support.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely would have done historically as well as anybody else, at least the 5 points. Because Gary Johnson numbers, the Clark numbers, these are like the comparable. Like Gary Johnson 2016 did better than Clark, and that's why Clark is so significant, because the high time was 1980, the second high time was 2016, and we're still, and we're not, we're drifting now.
Yep. I think ultimately that's where we're at. We have to create party growth. I think the problem a lot of people see is the problem I've talked about, which is that no one really knows the correct way to pilot a party like this or what to do in total, because whether people want to admit it or not, the party is still young in comparison to the people we're battling against. And we don't have, again, a lot of the people in the party who are at the top of the party even don't have a ton of political experience or still learning a lot of things. So in general, that's the foibles the party are always going to fall into, because we're a young political party. We're trying to make cultural and political change from scratch. That is not something that happens overnight. And we're now getting to an age where, like you're talking about, we're either going to stick around or fade away. I see this as sort of a tipping point for the party where, yeah, people are going to have to make up their mind as to whether or not they want this party to continue to exist or whether they're done with the experiment. I ultimately think it's going to continue to exist, and I hope it does. So I'm trying to keep a hold of it.
I think the history of minor third parties, and the given history, there's only one other party that's a little older historically that that reached an older age than we did in the Libertarian Party, and that was the Socialist Party of America. They lasted 60 years, 65 years, something like that. So, and of course, they don't exist anymore. They've as that particular entity. The Libertarian Party, the experiment with it was always a reaction to the culture, reaction to war, reaction to, well, exactly what the Clark campaign talked about, which was the draft, economic essential planning, the inflation issue. But some of those issues we don't even deal with. Like we don't have the draft anymore, right? The question is like, what comes next? And so we have to be willing to try different things. I will say Angela McArdle tried a lot of new things that work for the party. I would say that we don't know if it'll work in the long term without it being tried again, like in succeeding. But LP Colorado has this strategy called the Liberty Pledge that seems to be able to, that you can replicate, right? That you can get a candidate in another political party that could win to sign your Liberty Pledge, and then you can negotiate support on that basis. New Hampshire ultimately goes even more radical, right? They don't even try to play with running libertarians. They just say, well, we're going to be the mouthpiece for the libertarian movement, and all our people that are doing anything real serious for liberty are doing so in the GOP in New Hampshire, and that's the Free State Project. They don't have a firm commitment.
Which I think, I'll be clear, I think for them makes perfect sense.
Right, for them, absolutely. And so they say they control, like the Speaker of their state house is a Free State Project member, right? They have 40% of the seats allocated in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. They're trying to get that kind of influence in the state Senate, and one day, not now, they may run for somebody for statewide office. Eventually, maybe they'll get into the federal election situation. And that's the typical growth you have for a regional power or regional party structure, right? They just don't care about the labels. They're just doing what they do, and you can start seeing that maybe it's the hostilities around doing something different or not appreciated becomes the bigger picture of why we're having all these conflicts. If the lack of expectations. Oh, if you only supported my idea more, it would have made a difference. I'm like, but you still lose, right?
Yeah.
So, or right, or if you just did it my way, it would work out better. But how will that turn the trend, right? Where's the confidence to recruiting more people? So I ultimately the fighting is so severe though that it ends up being is who can outlast the other side now is what it becomes. That's what it devolves into, like just like
Yeah.
anything else. So we have to keep talking. We can't keep suing each other. We ultimately, if people are pressed into a situation where you have to do something and ask forgiveness, I mean, we're in a very short. Politics is on a tight schedule, of qualifications and influence. You only have so much influence in a given time, and it expires. So that's the other unfortunate part of the politics says that you sometimes you can't satisfy everybody, and frankly probably shouldn't. But that means that a lot of people who still think the party should appear in a certain way, uh, they're gonna feel left out. And like you said, it's not necessarily a purge because they're actually legitimately strong libertarians in terms of ideology. The difference ends up becoming how do we get to liberty.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and frankly, I think Gary Nolan, the founder of the party, and Don kept he passed away with that question still on his lips. How do we get there? Even after
Yeah.
40 years, after basically up to the 40-year anniversary of the party.
Yep. All
So
right. Well, I think I think we've covered basically the gambit. I think we've covered your petition pretty well. I think people should read through this and everything, but I think it's worth signing and sending in. I think in general, and I do like that you gave people the ability to select sort of, hey, this is what I agree with, this is what I don't, sort of thing. So if there's a section in there that you don't agree with, you don't have to sign that part. You can sign the rest. I've read through it. I think it's at least worth the LNC having to answer to these things. And so I think that certainly influences my reasoning for signing. Um, but and I hope everybody um, again will continue to kind of talk about this, especially with the convention next year and things like that. People need to really kind of flesh these conversations out now before things get even spicier.
definitely, I think a lot of these problems are not the first time they come up in the long history of the party. So the LNC has a choice to respond to this, maybe update some of its rules so they don't happen again, and maybe open up the conversation because the party needs it, the membership need to have this conversation. They need to have. Doesn't hurt to talk more, right? If
Well,
it
I've
means
been saying for a while, I'd love to see them do an actual like the LNC doing a call where literally anybody who's a party member can call in and talk to them. Like actually answer for some of this shit to the general populace of the party. I don't know why that's never really happened in the Libertarian Party. Often, apparently, they can only do that if you go to an LNC meeting. No, you can set up a Zoom meeting right now. You can send out notifications to the individual affiliates and have them put forward a couple people to go to this thing to get questions and answers and to really put some of these people to the fire and ask what's been going on with the National Party for all this time.
it would make sense for anybody who legit donates, I don't know, $100, $200 or more to be able to have that kind of access. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
certainly.
appreciate
All
your
right. Well,
time. Thanks so much for having me.
I enjoy it. It was fun, and we'll get you back on maybe and like I said, maybe I'm gonna have Hannah on soon. I did get a DM from her, so we will set that up here soon, and I'll have her on the show. And I'd like to talk to maybe the other side of this too, but I think Karen Ann's sort of out of my wheelhouse at this point. I think the LP Alliance people, the only person on there I've had any real engagement with is the Roos, and so I don't know reaching out to those people. So I don't know, but in general, I think I'd love to see you Have you been on LP Alliance?
Yeah, and
Okay.
threw me off.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
couldn't handle it.
Doesn't surprise me at all, because I have a feeling going through some of this, like, how could you square, like, and again, a lot of them I'm sure couldn't argue against a lot of the things you're bringing up, which is why they threw you off. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's kind of hilarious to find out. All right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed. If you're new to the show, go ahead and subscribe. I am just about like 15 or so subscribers away from 1,000. We're slowly getting there, people. Just put out a new video talking about new versus old CGI. That's about 8 minutes long, edited. You can go check that out on the channel. And I'll catch you guys later. Go check out Hector's petition there. The link is on screen. You can just put that little short link right into your URL, and that'll take you over there and you can read through. All right, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take it easy. Deuces.